I was sitting in a hospital waiting room at 2 a.m. a few weeks ago, watching two very different men. One was dressed in high-end athleisure, tapping away on a MacBook, looking visibly annoyed that a minor ankle sprain was interrupting his flow. He was on the phone, talking loudly about discipline and how you get out what you put in. He looked like the poster child for the self-made success stories we see all over our feeds, the kind of person who believes every win is a direct result of his own sweat. Across from him sat a man in a faded delivery jacket, clutching a plastic bag of medicine like it was made of gold. He wasn't checking a laptop, he was staring at the floor, calculating something in his head. You could almost see the math happening, the cost of the emergency visit versus the rent, the missed shifts versus the debt. He wasn't crying, he just looked incredibly still. It was clear he'd probably worked twice as many hours that week as the guy with the MacBook, yet he looked like he was one bad day away from a total collapse. It was a jarring sight. We're raced on this comforting narrative that life is a fair race, that if you just run fast enough, you'll reach the finish line. We tell ourselves that hard work is the great equalizer. But standing there, it felt like a lie. It wasn't that one man worked harder, it was that they weren't even running on the same terrain. For the first guy, luck was an invisible tailwind he mistook for his own speed. For the second, luck wasn't about winning a trophy. It was simply the hope that today wouldn't be the day everything fell apart. We love to count trophies and celebrate the grind, but we rarely talk about the silent, uneven distribution of the starting blocks. Why is it that the people who struggle the most are often the ones we label as unlucky, while we call the ones who started with a safety net self-made? If hard work were the only variable, the world would look very different. The truth is, luck is working in the background of every life. We just don't like to admit how much of the script it's actually writing.
Wow. That image you just painted, the two men in that waiting room, I mean, that is the perfect encapsulation of what we're here to unpack today.
It's something you can't unsee once you notice it.
Exactly. It's haunting because it's so familiar. We see versions of it every single day, but we rarely stop to really analyze the mechanics of it.
Right. You just have an emotional reaction.
You stop at, oh, that's sad, or, that's unfair. But what we are doing in this deep dive is stripping away that sentimentality to look at the machinery underneath.
Why?
We're talking about luck, but not as this metaphysical concept, not karma or destiny. We're talking about it as a biological and evolutionary force.
Because when I was sitting there, I wasn't thinking about biology, I was thinking about fairness. But the research we have lined up, it suggests that my own reaction, that instinctive need to assess who deserved to be there and why, is actually a biological program in itself.
Yeah. And that's our mission today. We are going to explore why the human brain struggles so profoundly to process inequality.
Yeah.
We have this really deep-seated need to attribute success to character, like the MacBook guy's discipline.
Right, his grind.
Exactly, his grind. When the data, it often points squarely at environment.
So today we're going to look at how these ancestral environments clash with modern economies.
And how our bodies can physically encode poverty as a survival strategy.
And this part is fascinating, why behavior that looks risky or even irrational to an outsider is actually, when you look at the math, completely rational for the person living it.
It's all about perspective.
We're essentially asking if our biology is writing a script that we are completely unaware of. And, if it is, how much of our choice is actually just adaptation. So let's go back to that hospital room. I want to dissect my own reaction for a moment, if we can. As annoyed as I was by the guy on the phone, bragging about his hustle, there was a part of my brain that instinctively wanted to respect him. My brain wanted to believe he earns that confidence. And conversely, looking at the delivery guy, my brain had to work so hard not to assume he'd made a mistake somewhere along the line. I mean, why do we instinctively feel the MacBook guy earned his spot and the delivery guy somehow lost his?
Okay, so what you're describing is a concept that researchers like Philip Tetlock have explored. They call it the Intuitive Prosecutor.
The Intuitive Prosecutor.
Yeah. To understand why you felt that way, you have to completely remove yourself from that modern hospital waiting room and just transport your mind back to the environment where our brains actually evolved.
Okay, so we're talking about the Pleistocene era. Yeah. Small groups, hunter-gatherers.
Exactly. For the vast majority of human history, I mean, like 99% of it, we lived in these small bands, maybe 50 to 150 people tops. Right. And in that specific context, resources were incredibly tight. There was no surplus. There was no refrigerator full of food.
If you didn't hunt, you didn't eat. It was that simple.
It was that simple. But even more critically, if you decided to slack off, If you decided to be lazy, you weren't just hurting yourself.
You were hurting me. You were hurting the entire tribe.
Because we were all sharing the same kill. It was a zero-sum survival scenario, really.
So we had to evolve a way to police that.
We evolved to be hyper-vigilant detectors of cheaters or free riders. We evolved to be, as Tetlock says, vigilant prosecutors of effort.
Because in a small tribe, it's easy to see the connection. Behavior and outcome are tightly linked.
Very tightly linked. If you're lazy, you fail.
Yeah.
If you work hard, you contribute. The feedback loop is incredibly short.
So we have this ancient software running in our heads that basically says outcome equals effort. It's a heuristic, a mental shortcut.
You could call it a fair but biased cognitive model. We have a deep evolutionary psychological need to believe the world is fair, that outcomes are tied directly to inputs. So when you see success, like the man in the expensive athleisure, where your intuitive prosecutor kicks in, and it works backward from the outcome.
It sees the success first.
It sees success, and then it retroactively invents virtues to explain it. He has money, therefore he must be disciplined. He must be smart. He must be a good hunter.
And when we see the delivery man struggling,
the same mechanism just runs in reverse. We see struggle or lack of resources, and that intuitive prosecutor assumes a lack of virtue.
He must not have planned well. He must be lazy.
He must be a bad hunter.
Right.
We fill in the blanks with character flaws because the alternative.
The alternative is that the outcome has nothing to do with the effort.
And that's cognitively dissonant for us. It's deeply unsettling.
So it's basically the fundamental attribution error, but on steroids. We attribute his situation to his character, not his context.
It is the fundamental attribution error, but it's serving a very specific function. This connects directly to something called system justification theory, which was popularized by a researcher named John Jost.
Okay.
He argues that this isn't just a simple mistake we make, it's a defense mechanism. Believing that the system is legitimate, that it's fair, serves what he calls a palliative function.
Palliative, like a painkiller, an emotional painkiller.
Exactly like a painkiller. Think about the anxiety that would consume you if you truly, deeply accepted the reality of that waiting room.
Mm-hmm.
If you admitted that the delivery man was working twice as hard as the MacBook guy but was still losing, what does that imply?
It implies the world is chaotic, that the rules don't matter.
And that you could be next, no matter how hard you work.
Fine. If his hard work didn't save him, then my hard work isn't a guarantee for me either.
Correct. And that thought is a genuine existential threat. Yeah. So to reduce that anxiety, your brain acts like an emotional anesthetic. It rationalizes the inequality.
And it tells you a story.
It tells you a story. No, the system works. The MacBook guy is disciplined. The delivery guy made bad choices. It restores your sense of order and, more importantly, your sense of safety.
There was a study I read in preparation for this that, it just drove this point home so hard. It showed that people actually work harder when they think the system itself is being tested.
Yes. Researchers gave participants a task. For one group, they said the task was just for fun.
Okay.
For the other group, they said the task was diagnostic of the fairness of the American system, that success in the task would prove the system is valid and meritocratic.
Then.
The people who were told it proved the system works.
Yeah.
They worked significantly harder.
So they weren't even working for the reward. They were working to prove their own worldview was correct.
They were working to validate the legitimacy of the structure they live in. We will literally burn ourselves out just to prove that the game isn't rigged.
Because the idea of a rigged game is just too psychologically painful to bear.
Exactly. So what we're left with is this massive cognitive mismatch.
We're running a hunter-gatherer justice software, which assumes small groups and direct effort reward links.
On global capitalist hardware.
In a modern, complex economy, success is determined by these huge invisible variables. Interest rates, the zip code you were born in, inherited wealth, who your parents know.
Global trade policy.
Right. These are the invisible tailwinds I mentioned in the opening. But our hunter-gatherer brain can't see any of that. It only sees the person.
It can't process it. So we misattribute all that luck as discipline.
It's like we're all watching a game of Monopoly where one player started with all the hotels already on the board, but we're just praising them for how well they rolled the dice.
And we're criticizing the person who started with no money for playing poorly.
And that criticism isn't just social, is it? As we're about to see, it completely ignores the biological reality of how those starting conditions actually shape the player.
This is where it gets really deep.
Okay, so this is where we really need to pivot from psychology to biology, because luck isn't just about the money in your bank account. It seems it actually changes the wiring of your body.
Yes.
I want to share another story that I think frames this part of the conversation perfectly. Imagine two children, Sarah and Mia, born into the same city but into two different biological realities. I read a study that framed their lives not through choices, but through life history strategies. Sarah grew up in a quiet, affluent suburb. Her luck was a low-stress environment and high-quality nutrition. Her body, sensing stability, opted for a slow strategy, delayed puberty, years of focused education, and a late entry into parenthood. Mia, however, grew up in an area defined by resource instability. Her nervous system was constantly bathed in the stress hormones of a neighborhood where safety wasn't guaranteed. Biologically, her body calculated that the future was uncertain. She experienced early developmental milestones and shifted toward a fast strategy, prioritizing immediate reproduction and short-term survival over long-term investments like a master's degree. When I look at stories like Mia's, it's a reality check against the pull yourself up by your bootstraps narrative. Her choices weren't just mental, they were biological adaptations to her environment. Her body was trained to ensure she survived in a world that felt volatile. It's easy to look at fast life strategies from a place of privilege and label them as poor decisions, but from an evolutionary perspective, she was making the most rational trade-off possible with the hand she was dealt. We have to realize that luck isn't just about money in the bank. It's about the chemical signals we send to our children's developing bodies.
This is such a critical pivot in how we understand all of this. We often talk about poverty as a lack of money, but what that story illustrates so powerfully is life history theory.
Life history theory.
It's a framework that biologists use to understand how organisms allocate energy.
Okay, so it's like an energy budgeting problem.
Every living thing, you, me, a tree, an amoeba, has a finite amount of energy. You can't do everything. You have to make choices biologically about where to invest it.
And what are the main choices?
The two main buckets, so to speak, are somatic effort and reproductive effort.
Yes.
Sure, somatic effort is basically investing in yourself. It's building your body, maintaining your health, growing a large and complex brain, learning skills.
So education would fall under that.
Absolutely. It's the long game. And it relies entirely on the assumption that you will be alive in 10, 15, 20 years to reap the rewards of that investment.
And what about reproductive effort?
Reproductive effort is exactly what it sounds like. It's mating, producing offspring, getting your genes into the next generation as quickly and efficiently as possible. This is the short game.
You know, in the animal kingdom, this makes me think of the difference between, say, a tenrec and an elephant. Yeah.
Let's look at the tenrec. It's a small, sort of hedgehog-like mammal from Madagascar.
Right.
It lives in a very, very dangerous environment. High predation, high mortality rates. Now, if a tenrec tries to play the long game, if it says, you know what, I'm going to wait 5 years to reproduce so I can grow bigger and stronger.
It's going to get eaten before it ever has babies.
It will be eaten. That is a failed strategy. So the tenrec's biology adapts.
It plays the fast strategy. Live fast, die young, leave a lot of offspring.
It grows incredibly rapidly, reaches sexual maturity very quickly, has large litters of babies, and dies young. That is the biological adaptation to danger.
And the elephant is the complete opposite.
The complete opposite. The elephant is massive. It has very few natural predators. It lives in a stable social structure. It can afford to play the slow strategy.
Right.
It takes nearly 2 decades to reach maturity.
Yeah.
It invests a huge amount of energy in a massive, complex brain. It has one calf at a time and invests years and years of care into it.
So the big question then is, are humans tenrecs or elephants?
Well, generally speaking, humans are elephants. We are a classic, long-lived, big-brained, slow strategy mammal. But, and this is the absolute key to understanding inequality, humans have something called intraspecific variation.
Meaning variation within the species.
Exactly. We have a toggle switch. We can shift our strategy along the spectrum from fast to slow based on the environmental cues we receive during development.
So Mia's body receiving all these signals of stress, high cortisol, maybe noise, poor nutrition, it essentially said, warning, we are in tenrec territory. The future is not guaranteed. We need to switch to fast mode.
And this is all happening below the level of conscious thought. This is not a decision she made after looking at her bank account one day.
Her endocrine system made the decision.
Her entire biology made the decision.
Yeah.
And the master switch for this appears to be childhood socioeconomic status, or SES, specifically communicated through something called mortality cues.
And mortality cues are just signals that life is short and unpredictable.
Signals of violence, death, chaos, unpredictability. There was a fascinating study where researchers took people from different childhood backgrounds and primed them with these mortality cues.
How did they do that?
They had them read news stories about violence, death, just generally unpredictable and scary things. They reminded them of the fragility of life.
Okay, so they stressed them out.
They did. And the result was incredible. The people from wealthy, stable childhoods, the elephants, they responded to the threat by delaying gratification.
So they became more cautious.
More. They wanted to save more money, plan for the future, hunker down, and build their fortress.
If a big storm is coming, you board up the house.
Right. But the people from poor, unstable childhoods, the Tenrecs, did the exact opposite. When they felt threatened, they accelerated.
They sped up.
They wanted to spend money now. They wanted to enjoy the immediate moment. They showed an increased desire for having children sooner rather than later.
So from the outside to the wealthy observer, that looks like bad impulse control. Why are you buying a new TV when you might lose your job? But you're saying it's not impulsivity, it's actually a kind of rational despair.
It is completely rational given the underlying premise that the future doesn't exist. If you're a Tenrec and you smell a predator, you don't save your nuts for winter, you eat them right now.
Right.
If your brain believes the bank is going to burn down tomorrow, withdrawing all your cash and spending it today is the only logical move on the board.
This has to have massive implications for things like education, too. I remember you mentioned a study by Zhu on brain development.
Yes. This brings us right back to that concept of somatic effort, building a brain. The human brain is incredibly expensive, metabolically speaking.
It's a luxury item.
It's only about 2% of our body weight, but it consumes 20% of our metabolic energy. It's the gas guzzler of the body.
Wow.
So in a deprivation environment, like Mia's neighborhood, the body faces a stark choice. If calories are scarce, or if stress is high, which also burns a ton of energy,
the body can't afford the luxury item.
It can't afford to fully invest in what we call embodied capital. That's the complex brain structures required for long-term planning, abstract thought, and delayed gratification.
So the body actually diverts energy away from developing the brain.
It prioritizes immediate survival mechanisms over these long-term developmental investments. Poverty, stress, scarcity, they literally reshape the physical architecture of the brain. But, and this is a point I have to stress, we must not frame this as damage.
Okay.
It is adaptation.
Extinction, that feels really important.
If you view it as damage, you see me as broken or less than. You see her as a problem to be fixed.
Right.
If you view it as adaptation, you see her as optimized for a different world. Her biology did its job perfectly.
It prepared her for the world it thought she was going to live in.
Exactly. The epigenetics research about champagne on rats illustrates this just beautifully. They studied mother rats who engaged in what they called low licking and grooming.
Which is basically the rat equivalent of neglectful or low-touch parenting.
In a safe, cushy lab cage. We would look at that and say, that's a bad mother. And her pups, they grew up to be anxious, high-stress, hypervigilant adults.
Okay, so they were stressed out.
But then the researchers did something incredible. They took those anxious rats and placed them in a high-threat environment, one with predators and scarcity.
Yeah.
They outperformed the calm rats who came from good mothers.
Seriously.
Yes, because the low maternal care wasn't neglect. It was a signal. The mother was chemically communicating to her pups through her behavior. The world out there is dangerous. You need to be on high alert. You need to react fast.
Wow.
The pup's DNA methylation actually changed to produce a high alert phenotype. It was a perfect biological match to a bad environment.
So Mia's fast strategy isn't a failure. It's her biology successfully preparing her for the volatility she was born into.
It's a biological success story. The tragedy is that she is perfectly adapted for a war zone, but she is being judged by the standards of a peace treaty.
We expect her to act like an elephant when her biology has spent her entire childhood building a Tenrec.
Exactly.
That reframes everything for me. We look at risky behavior like dropping out of school or crime or financial impulsivity. We see it all as a character flaw. But if we look at it through this biological lens, it starts to look a lot more like a survival strategy.
It changes the entire definition of what risk even means.
Okay, let's talk about risk. Because it's one thing to say someone buys a TV they can't afford. Well, it's another thing entirely to talk about the kind of heavy, life-altering risks that we sometimes see in marginalized communities.
Right.
And to do that, I want to bring in a final story about someone who has seemingly opted out of the safe path entirely. I saw a video essay about a young man named Elias who lives in a post-industrial town where the local factory closed 20 years ago. To the outside world, Elias looks like a high-risk individual. He participates in illegal street racing and refuses to contribute to any local community projects. But if you look closer, Elias has realized that the luck of the system is non-randomly distributed. It's never going to land on him. He sees the cooperative social structure of his country as a scam because, in his eyes, the probability of him succeeding through traditional low-risk means is effectively zero. So he engages in high-risk behavior because the safe path leads nowhere, and he stops investing in collective goods like voting or volunteering because he no longer believes the collective includes him. This is where the social contract truly breaks down. When people like Elias feel that the luck of the draw is rigged against them, their evolutionary response isn't to work harder within the system, it's to break it or exit it. While I can't condone illegal racing or social apathy, I can empathize with the underlying frustration. If a game is rigged, why should you play by the rules? If we want people to invest in our society, we have to ensure the luck of opportunity is something they actually have a mathematical chance of catching. Without that, risk-taking becomes the only logical move left on the board.
Elias is a textbook example of what an economist named Christopher Barrett calls bifurcated wealth dynamics. But I think the simpler way to get your head around it is the poverty trap.
So why does he choose street racing? I mean, to most people listening, that just seems like a death wish. It looks completely irrational.
It looks irrational because we are judging it from the safety of the ground floor. Barrett uses the analogy of the burning building. Imagine you are trapped on the 4th floor of a building that is on fire. The fire is rising fast. If you stay in the room, the probability of death is 100%. It is a certainty. You will not survive.
Right.
Now, you look out the window and you see a narrow ledge, or maybe a tree you might be able to jump to. But the risk of falling and dying if you jump is, say, 90%.
So 90% chance of death if I jump, 100% chance of death if I stay.
Exactly. A rational person standing on the sidewalk below would scream, "Don't jump. That's incredibly dangerous."
But for me, in the room.
For the person in the room, jumping is the only rational choice. It's the only option on the table that offers a non-zero chance of survival.
So for Elias, the safe path working, a minimum wage job in a dead-end town, that's the burning room.
That's the burning room. The safe behavior guarantees poverty. It guarantees a slow, certain failure. The risky behavior, the street racing, the crime, the hustle, it offers a small probability of a big win.
Or at the very least, it offers the feeling of agency, of doing something.
So we, from our safe position, label him as risk-loving. We imply he does it for the thrill, that it's a personality flaw.
When in reality, he is risk-responding.
He's jumping because the stairs are on fire. It's a situational necessity, not a character trait.
Perspective. But there's another part of Elias's story that I have to admit worries me even more. He's not just taking these personal risks. He's withdrawing from the community. He's not voting. He's not volunteering. He's defecting.
Right. And this brings us to the final, really crucial piece of our puzzle today. Evolutionary game theory.
Okay.
Specifically, the difference between zero-sum and positive-sum games.
Can you unpack that for us?
A positive-sum game is what we call a coordination game. Think of a classic barn raising in an old farming community.
Okay, everyone gets together to build.
Right. If I help you build your barn today, and you help me build my barn tomorrow, we both end up with barns. We both win. The total amount of good, the pie gets bigger.
And in that environment, trust is the winning strategy.
Trust is everything. This is how wealthy, stable, high-resource environments tend to operate. Networking, investing, collaboration.
Okay, so what's a zero-sum game?
A zero-sum game is different. The pie is a fixed size. If you get a slice, that is one less slice for me. If you win, I must lose.
There's a winner and a loser.
And poor, volatile environments often function like zero-sum games because resources are actually genuinely scarce.
So Elias looks at the whole cooperative social structure, voting, community projects, playing by the rules, and he thinks this whole thing is a scam.
He does. And here's the real tragedy of it. Research by a scholar named Mengesha shows that once a community comes to believe the world is zero-sum, usually because of scarcity or a history of bad luck, trust becomes a losing strategy.
So?
Because if you are the only person acting trustingly in a zero-sum environment, you just get exploited. You get taken advantage of and speaking.
So the only rational move is to defect, to look out only for yourself and your immediate kin.
Exactly. And this creates a devastating lock-in effect. The entire community gets locked into a cycle of distrust. Even if everyone wanted to cooperate, no one can afford to be the first one to let their guard down.
And that prevents them from building the very cooperative structures that could actually lift them out of poverty in the first place.
It's a vicious cycle.
There was one statistic I found in the research for this that was genuinely shocking. It was this idea of the inequality paradox from Liu and Howe.
Yes. This one is counterintuitive.
We often assume that it's the poor who stop contributing to the public good because, they can't afford it. We think, oh, they're too desperate to help anyone else. But the study showed something completely different. In unequal groups, the high endowment players, the wealthy ones, they actually contribute less to the public good relative to their means than the poor do.
So the rich guys are the ones defecting more often.
In many of these experimental settings, yes.
And the logic seems to be that because they have enough resources to be independent, they feel less dependent on the group's overall success. They have their own private safety net, so they don't need the public one.
They become free riders on the social contract. And that just brings us right back full circle to the MacBook guy in the hospital. He thinks he's this independent, self-made island, but in reality, he might be the one free riding on the stability, the infrastructure, and the social trust that the delivery guy is actually paying for with his labor and his taxes.
It's a very distinct possibility. The delivery guy relies on the collective for survival. The MacBook guy imagines he has transcended it.
Wow. So if we try to put all this together, we've got the MacBook guy whose brain is protecting his ego by denying the role of luck. We have Sarah, whose biology prepared her for marathon life. We have Mia, whose biology prepared her for a sprint. And we have Elias, who is jumping out of a burning building because the stairs are gone.
It creates a pretty comprehensive picture of how biological adaptation drives social outcomes.
Okay, but this leads to the ultimate and maybe the most difficult question. If we admit that luck is writing this much of the script, if biology is responding to our environment before we even get a chance to think, does that mean we have no agency?
No.
Are we just biological robots programmed by our zip code?
We have agency. But acknowledging the biological reality of luck means we have to understand that our agency is constrained by the game board we're playing on.
So if we want different outcomes,
we cannot just lecture people on having more discipline. We have to redesign the board.
I mean, what does the research say about actually breaking this cycle?
The work by people like Mengesha and Kriskevicius is very, very clear on this. You cannot educate people out of zero-sum beliefs if their environment is still volatile and zero-sum.
Right. You can't tell Elias, hey, just trust the system if the system keeps burning him.
Or tell Mia, you should really plan for the future if her body is screaming at her that there is no future.
Words don't change biological signals. You can't just mindset your way out of a cortisol spike.
The solution, according to this research, lies in reducing downside risk.
Safety nets.
Exactly. Insurance, social safety nets, stable healthcare, guaranteed minimums for survival. If Elias knows that failure doesn't mean starvation, if he knows he won't burn, if he stays in the building and doesn't jump, he stops the high-risk behavior.
He stops street racing?
He stops street racing, and he starts investing in the future.
So providing that stability essentially sends a new signal to his biology. It says, it is safe to be an elephant now.
Correct. It flips the switch from a fast life history strategy to a slow life history strategy. When you guarantee the floor, people start building the ceiling. There is a catch, and we have to be honest about it. Mengesha's modeling reveals a fundamental tension, a trade-off, really, between efficiency and equity.
Efficiency and equity. Okay, unpack that for the final stretch here.
What it means is that highly efficient systems, ones that are designed to maximize total wealth generation, often tolerate or even create high inequality. They allow the winners to run very, very fast without ever looking back. If you try to flatten the playing field too much to ensure total equity, you might slow down the overall growth of the economy. You might shrink the pie.
So we have to choose. We can have one or the other.
Yes. The research suggests that we probably can't have maximum efficiency and maximum equity simultaneously.
So we have to decide as a society.
We have to decide how much inequality we are willing to tolerate in the name of growth. And conversely, how much efficiency we are willing to trade to ensure that people like Elias and Mia have a real mathematical chance of participation.
And that's the big political question at the heart of everything, isn't it? But what really strikes me is that the science we've talked about supports this idea that inequality isn't just a social problem. It's a biological input that creates the very behaviors we then complain about.
That is the key takeaway from all of this. When we create environments of high volatility and deprivation, we are manufacturing tenrecs. We are actively programming short-term thinking, risk-taking, and distrust.
So if we want a society of elephants,
People who invest and plan and cooperate.
we have to build the environment that allows that biology to emerge and to thrive.
It's a shift from fixing people to fixing the context.
It changes how you look at everyone, doesn't it? I mean, we started this whole deep dive in a hospital waiting room, and we ended up in the weeds of evolutionary game theory. But really, it's all the same story.
It is exactly the same story. The MacBook guy and the delivery guy aren't just two random people in a room. They are living, breathing representatives of two different biological adaptations, the elephant in the stable jungle and the tenrec in the volatile one.
And luck isn't some kind of magic. It's the invisible accumulation of starting resources and maternal stress signals and environmental stability that determines whether our brains play a long game or a fast game.
And just realizing that, just understanding that framework, it helps us move past judgment. It helps us see the logic in the lives of other people, even when their choices look alien to us.
It transforms them versus us into adaptation versus adaptation.
And that's a much more productive place to start a conversation.
So the next time you see someone making a choice that looks impulsive or risky, or you see someone celebrating their own discipline, remember the biological math running underneath the surface. We tend to judge people's engines without ever looking at the road they're driving on. But perhaps the most radical idea is this. If we accept that luck is actually a biological signal of safety, then the goal of society shouldn't just be to reward the winners. It should be to build a world where fewer people are forced to bet everything just to survive the day.